Hi everyone, welcome to the interview of Beyond Border. This is Betty from China. Now say hi to you from Shanghai, China. At Beyond Border, we will have guests who have been living and working in different countries and cultures to share with us the valuable lesson that they have learned through their cross-culture journey. Today, let's meet Bo. Bo is the Deputy Director of the Danish Culture Center in Beijing. He is, of course, from Denmark and has been living and working in Beijing since 2010. Bo studied theater science and economics. And before he came to China, he had also lived in US and Scotland, except his home, Denmark. In our conversation, Bo introduced me about the mission of Danish Culture Center and also very interesting culture projects that he and his team had done in the past and also are going to organize in the future, which he said made him deeply feel about the value and meaning of his work. And more than that, he shared with me his understandings in terms of what he thinks art and culture can do to strengthen culture understanding among people from different societies, and also one of the best suggestions that I have ever heard given to people who are about to stay on cross-culture journey. So here's my conversation with Bo. So Bo, can you tell us what brought you to China in the first place?
I would say what brought me to China in the very beginning was actually serendipity or fate. It was part of my education. I wanted to have an internship abroad, so I applied different cultural institutions around the world, and actually the current director of the Danish Cultural Center was the first to answer me. So I decided to go to China. I had never been to Asia before, so everything was, quite new and very inspirational. And had he not replied as the first person, then I might never have ended up in China. So that is life. You can never plan these things.
Did you have any knowledge or impression about China before you came?
Yeah, well, I didn't really have any expectations or biases before coming to China. I'd never been to Asia before, so I had no idea what to expect. You can read a lot in books, you can search online and stuff like that, but, it really does not prepare you. So I remember I found China to be very dynamic, and I still think that is the case today. Also, people are very friendly and chatty, which is quite different than, Danes who are often more reserved until you get to know them. I also thought that, China is a safe country, but it takes time to getting used to the organic nature of the traffic and just the sheer amount of people everywhere. It's a huge country and so diverse, both in terms of scenery and culture, food, everything. It's quite difficult to comprehend even when you live here, especially as a foreigner from a small and homogeneous country like Denmark.
Where do you like to go and what you like to do in Beijing?
Besides spending time with friends, of course, I like to visit places in Beijing that I don't normally go to. Not every day, at least. I mean, especially the older part of the city. So just walking around, see what has changed and what is still the same. I also like to visit museums and cultural heritage sites, that on a regular basis. And of course, some of it might be work-related, but I think everyone living in China has a fluctuating work-life balance. So work and life sort of flows in between each other.
Where have you traveled to or would like to travel to in China?
To be honest, even though I lived in many years in China, I haven't really been much of a tourist here. Not that I don't want to. I mean, I would really love to, but doing longer vacations, I would normally go to Denmark to visit my family. Luckily I've been been able to travel for work and have been able to visit places both north and south. If I could mention one place I would like to visit, it would be the Miao villages in Guizhou. I think it's one of the oldest minority group in China, and I really like their batik textile and this culture around it.
So can you tell us a little bit about Danish Culture Center?
So Danish Cultural Center is Denmark's official platform for the exchange of art and culture in China. It's based on a bilateral agreement between China and Denmark, and China has its largest cultural center in Copenhagen. And we have been a national cultural center since the fall of 2014 and are part of the world's oldest cultural exchange institution, which began in the 40s. We have our venue in 798 Art District in Beijing, but we do projects all over China. So we are not a museum and we are not a gallery. We don't show art for art's sake. We use art and culture as a way to engage in conversation on different topics. It could be urban planning, female empowerment, gender equality, demographics, mental health and disabilities, children and youth, and so forth. I mean, all these topics we have worked with, and we aim to always have a Danish and a Chinese dimension in what we do, and all is based on encounters and respect.
Can you introduce us one or two projects that you have done?
Basically, I would rather mention two activities that showcase why culture can contribute and make a difference. So, doing an exhibition on disabilities last year, we made a variety of activities, including a workshop by a blind makeup artist and a leading influencer of the visual impaired community. At this event, we found out that one of the participants, a blind woman, had taken the train all the way from Anhui province to meet her idol in person rather than online. So taking the train by herself to Beijing and then finding her way to 798 and to our venue, we were quite taken back and very, very surprised. You know, they hugged and took selfies, even though they will never see those photos. And it was a day that she will remember for a long time. And that day we made a difference to her, and that's very meaningful to us and to do what we do. So that day was also very memorable to us. The second example was an exhibition on an aging population in Denmark and China, and how cities can be designed to accommodate such an aging population. As part of the exhibition, we had a 10-meter installation of the demographic development in Denmark and China from 1950 to 2050. And in 1950, the population was shaped like a normal triangle with a lot of young people at the bottom and a few older people at the top. In 2050, the triangle is basically turned upside down with a lot of old people and not that many young people. So instead of telling in words about the difficulties facing both countries, we use this installation to visualize the issue. You know, people understood it straight away, and to see young people realize, oh, this is me that will be affected. It was quite powerful and a good example on how culture can initiate a conversation on complex topics in different ways than words can do.
Do you think there is any one-size-fits-all kind of solution which works in one society that must work in another society?
We are not giving the solutions, so to speak, unnecessarily. We don't believe that we have a universal truth, but we use culture and art to sort of engage in this conversation on, for example, an aging population, and then if something can be taken from this, then great. If not, if people say, oh, this can never work in China, that's totally fine as well. But we use it to engage and not come with a pointing finger and say, you should do this or you should do that. Of course, experts should explain what works in their field, but then the recipient should, decide if that is something that is applicable, right? So, I mean, a normal cultural exchange, it should be an honest exchange.
Yes.
And then you see what can inspire you and what you think you can can bring from this conversation, and then you infuse it with your own ideas and then make it your own.
What do you think the biggest barriers for people to learn another culture effectively, or learn another culture from local people's point of view?
I feel in most cases barriers are very much a personal choice or a personal barrier. Are you interested or motivated to engage in cultural exchange? I think it's very much up to the individual to expose yourself to other cultures, ideas, and inspiration. First you must be open or willing to accept that others have different views and ways of doing things. It's not about which might be better or worse, but understand the fact that your own viewpoints and cultural experiences are not universal. Basically, all cultural understanding begins with self-understanding. You must know your own culture first and be aware of what you take for granted, basically. If you look at a sort of a motivation and availability or possibility matrix, where motivation is, are you interested in cultural exchange or not? And the possibility is, do you have access to cultural exchange or not? Then you have 4 choices. And the first one is, are you motivated and do you have the possibility? Then yes, cultural exchange can and will most likely take place. Second, if you don't have the motivation and there's not a possibility, then for sure there's not going to be a cultural exchange. The third is if you have the possibility, if cultural exchange is actually available, but you are not motivated, then most likely you're not going to engage in cultural exchange because you're not interested in it. And lastly, if you have the motivation but there is no possibility, then you probably will find a way to gain access and gain this possibility, and perhaps use digital new technologies, etc., to gain access. I think it's essential that we, first of all, continue to cooperate and exchange views and ideas. If we only read newspapers, social media, or watch films, we don't get an accurate representation of each other. We need to engage in conversation, in human interaction. And then we need honesty in the exchange, meaning, for me at least, the exchange should not be in order to try to persuade, to win an argument, to point fingers, or to preach. Exchange doesn't mean we should disregard our own foundation and local culture with another or with new ideas. But if we find through this conversation, through human interaction, through dialogue, if we find usable inspiration in each other, we can then take these elements. People-to-people interaction is the most important aspect, because the rest is, at least it's one step away, in the way that, there is another person who has made this specific film for a specific reason, or made this specific social media post for a specific reason, or written this specific text in the newspaper for a specific reason. It is not necessarily honest in a cultural exchange way.
Do you think art and culture activities will help people from different societies and countries to learn the culture of each other?
Yes, I think it can help, first of all. A country's art, design, architecture, theater, etc., it's always a reflection of the society, the history, the cultural characteristics. So yes, it can help facilitate an understanding and cross-cultural view of the country behind. It might not be a straightforward thing because it's an indirect method, but for example, for our activities, which are very varied, I mentioned earlier, they are topics in it itself, but it also gives, if you attend our activities, you will gain an idea about Denmark through this, through the various activities that actually also stand alone. So, it can also it'll act as an inspiration. Hopefully, you're thinking, wow, what is this? I want to know more to a certain topic. And then you can dig into this. The interesting thing is that art and culture have always found inspiration from other countries. Denmark and China, for example, are not only connected by the common love for Hans Christian Andersen. Chinese thoughts and ideas have been and will continue to be a valuable source of inspiration for Danish artists, for example. Just to give you some examples, we have the Danish architect Jørgen Utzon, who found the key elements to the Sydney Opera House in the Forbidden City and in the Yungang caves. We have designer Hans Wagner, who created one of his most famous and iconic chairs, the China chair, from studying the Chinese originals. Thousands of years of Chinese wisdom is the basis of the Danish composer Per Nørgaard's iconic composition I Ching. And basically every Danish ceramic or every ceramic in the world stand on the shoulders of the rich cultural heritage of China. So these works are works in their own right. They're not copies of an original. They are the original, but clearly they are inspired by Chinese culture.
Can you share with us some new exciting projects coming soon?
Yeah, we are always in the process of developing new projects and activities. I can mention two. For film buffs, they have might heard of a famous Danish director called Carl Th. Dreyer, who made film in the 1920s to 40s. And Dreyer is the most important director in Danish cinema. And in international film history, he also ranks as one of the greatest artists. And we work together with the Danish film authorities to create an exhibition and to show some of his film here in China. Another project is on how technology and knowledge sharing has been a cornerstone in cultural and scientific development, from the introduction of the famous Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe's instrument to China in the 17th century, to the modern open source movement which both China and Denmark are subscribing to. Actually, all of Tycho Brahe's instruments in Europe burned, which means that now China has the oldest version dating back to 1674. One of the aims is to show how cultural and scientific exchange have taken place over hundreds of years, and more often than not, it's a win-win situation.
Can you give some suggestions to people who are about to step on their cross-culture journey?
Well, I think the most important is to keep an open mind and don't be judgmental. Understand your own cultural background and try to understand the other side as well. Every culture has some positives and some negatives. Don't rely on stereotypes and other people's perspective, good or bad. Try to make your own opinion. Be honest in your approach and demand honesty back. Cultural exchange also requires reflection of all the inputs and experiences. So you will not find the Holy Grail through one activity or through one encounter and you think you know it all. Reflect on what you experience and that will build up over time. So basically the human conversation which we have talked about, that cultural exchange represent, you can call it the spice in the food that we all consume. It's possible to live without that spice, but it takes away the characteristics, the quality, and ultimately the enjoyment out of the food. It takes time to find the spice you like the most, but luckily you have the whole life to find out. Similar with cultural exchange, it's a journey that will never end.
So, this is my conversation with Bo. Just like Bo mentioned in our interview that the real authentic cross-culture exchange and understanding could only happen at people-to-people level. Movies, social media, or even other people's experience are more likely to bring us imagination of other culture rather than the real understanding of another culture. And another thing I cannot agree with him more is the most important factor for effective cross-cultural learning is the motivation of an individual. As a wise Chinese saying goes, there is a will, there is a way. So we're living in 21st century. Way is not a problem anymore. So I wish you find the right motivation that can bring you to a wonderful culture journey. And this is today's show. My name is Betty. I'll see you next time. Bye.